Well, welcome to our first ever roundtable. I'm Ron Wilstein, leader of the Wilstein Team here in Park City, Utah, and we're doing something different for the very first time where I've gathered our team members together to discuss something that we talk about frequently in the office, and that is in today's market when a buyer is presenting a reasonable offer and sellers are not necessarily being reasonable because they're holding to high prices, how do you deal with that? So with that in mind, let's begin by introducing the team members, starting with Dean.
My name's Dean DeLeone. I'm a buyer's consultant on the Wilstein Team. I've been with the Wilstein Team for 5 years now, and grew up in Park City. Love working on the team. Love working with buyers here in the area. And move on to Kathy.
All right, Kathy Leitze. I've lived in Park City for 15 years. I've been a realtor for 13 years, and I'm very familiar with both the residential and the resort investment properties. Love Park City.
Great, and I'm Jeremy Wilstein, the son of Ron Wilstein. I grew up here in Park City. I started real estate at the very end of 2009 when everybody was getting out of real estate. I specialize working with buyers and helping them find that specific property they need.
Super.
Doug?
Thank you. And I'm Doug Almstead, and I'm actually on the selling side of things. I'm the seller's consultant on the Wilstein Team. And I've been in Park City 20 years and selling real estate for 8 of those years up here.
All right, excellent. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to bounce around a number of questions. You guys respond based upon your experience. And we're recording this, so we're hoping that this will be valuable for, particularly for buyers and maybe for sellers as well in today's market. So let me just begin with the first question, and that is, what are you telling buyers about the current condition of the Park City real estate market?
I'll take that one. The current real estate market has continued how it's been for the last 5 or 6 years. The market has been strong. We've had different pockets that have increased in value. We've seen double-digit appreciation over the last number of years. So the market still is extremely strong. We are seeing some pullback in certain areas, and I think it's more attributed to sellers trying to really push the price, and I think they're just pushing it a little bit too high, and that's the slowdown. So I don't think the market's necessarily slowing down as much as sellers are just trying to jump the price too much, and buyers are showing a little resistance, and it's creating a little stalemate, but by no means is the market dropping or staying flat. It's still increasing.
Okay, anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say Jeremy's right. The still increasing. You're seeing a little bit of pushback, but that pushback's created because the buyers are educated. So they're just not seeing increasing prices and knowing that they have to pay more and more price or more money to get these properties. But they're educated. We're continuously educating our clients. We have the websites. Many agents have the websites where buyers are following the market on there. They're seeing what houses are listed at. So if you see one of those outlier houses that goes on the market and it's listed way high, it's not. People aren't just going to jump on that and go buy that. People know what's going on. So even though prices continue to increase, we still have educated buyers out there to keep it in check.
With good agents.
With good agents, that's right, Kathy.
Yep. And we talk about in our monthly webinars that when we look back at previous years versus now, that the time on the market for properties that are selling is less than even a year ago. So it's very strong. We're seeing upward movement in terms of number of sales, just about every category. However, at the same time, we're seeing that properties that are overpriced are staying in the market longer than a year ago. So there's definitely kind of a tug of war going on here. Sellers trying to get prices, record-breaking prices, buyers trying to move forward with reasonable offers and sometimes running into resistance. So with that in mind, let me throw out this question. What are you telling or advising your buyer clients when it comes to the negotiating process, preparing them for what they may encounter with today's overly aggressive sellers?
Sure. Sometimes there's a property that comes on the market, it's reasonably priced, and that property, unless there's something functionally wrong with it, will probably sell very quickly. Now, there are properties that come on the market that clearly overpriced. However, I might have a buyer that's interested in buying it. They say Jeremy, I don't think it's worth this much, but should I even put it in an offer? My answer is yes, we should put it in an offer for a couple reasons. I think sellers in Park City, and oftentimes those that maybe price their property so high or might be in the multi-million-dollar range, they put out a price because sometimes it's not off the data or there's not good data, and so they might put a price out there, and depending on how educated their agent is on the market, may tell them, hey, this is high, or yeah, let's go list it at this price. And so if you see a property you like, it doesn't take much time and any effort to put it in an offer, because that seller might be seeing an offer for the first time, and they might have a reality check and say, oh, why are they offering this? Well, they're not lowballing you, you're just priced way too high. So that's my advice to buyers. If you see a property you like, don't overpay for it. But if you like it enough, let's write an offer at where we think the fair market value is, make a case for that, and it's up to the seller to have a reality check or keep his property. So.
Doug, you work with sellers all the time. Have you ever met any that want to overprice it above the market?
Well, I've certainly had that experience. Yes, I have. As have you.
Yes, it's not uncommon at all. And so the buyers and the buyer's agents have to grapple with that when sellers can be unrealistic at times. So it does happen. So what do you do when presenting an offer to a seller or a seller's agent to put your best foot forward on behalf of a buyer?
Well, I always like to write a cover letter. So my buyers and I will always go through, look at the comps, discuss what we want to put an offer in at, get all the logistics figured out for our offer and what they would like to see. And then I always like to present it with in the email, I write a cover letter, and I write it like I'm writing it to the seller themselves. We're not trying to insult anybody by submitting an offer. They like the property, they want to move in, we're submitting them an offer. So we're not trying to insult them, and I'll write the letter like that, but I also want them to know the facts as far as what the comps are for that particular property and why we're coming in at our offer price, no matter where it's at. If it's way low or way lower than what the listed price is, or if it's relatively low or pretty close to what their listing price is, they deserve to know why we're coming in there, and I owe it to my clients to present that information accurately. But also, going back to what we said before, the seller's agents, and sometimes sellers just want to overprice their property. Their agents are giving them the information, the sold comps on their area, for what their property is worth ultimately. So they've seen this before, and now we're reiterating that information to them. So now they're seeing it from somebody else, and they're seeing it a second time, and now they might be able to have that reality check where, okay, well, this is making sense. I'm starting to get offers now. This is where I was told they would likely be at, and now it's happening, and possibly more willing to negotiate at a lower price.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Dean. And writing those cover letters, very, very important, especially in a highly competitive marketplace.
Right.
Not just when the property is priced high and you're trying to make a case for why the pricing should be lower, based on solid facts, but also in multiple offer situations, really hot properties. And if it's a family neighborhood and they know a family's moving in there, the sellers might take that and say, yeah, I'd like a family to move in here as opposed to an investor. Or they may not care at all. But if we don't write that cover letter and we don't give them that information, then we're in the same spot. If we don't write it, we're in the same spot. So we might as well write it, explain the details, explain why we're doing what we're doing, so that the seller can understand, because we might explain that to the seller's agent or the listing agent, but sometimes things can be lost in translation or not translated at all. So writing a cover letter helps get those hard facts over.
And I'll just comment on that often when we represent a seller, we're advising them as to the market conditions, and sometimes they receive it, sometimes they don't receive it. But there's really nothing being lost, whether they take our advice or not, until an offer rolls in. When an offer rolls in, it might be the exact same thing we've said, but this time if they reject it, they may be losing out on a sale, whereas before it's just talking about the market trying to price it right. So I've seen when you guys have done this, and sometimes other agents will do the extra effort to do it as well, that it really helps. It helps the seller have a reality check, not just theoretically during the listing period, but now there's a real sale, that real buyer might go away. Well, what have you found, Doug?
Well, I actually tend to agree with a lot of what's said here. So, as a seller's agent, what I need to understand, make sure my seller understands, are the terms of the offer. So, an offer letter can be certainly helpful, so we know if it's a 1031 tax-deferred exchange, if it's got a subject-to-sell clause, if they have to sell their primary home. It's a cash, is it finance? If it's finance, what are the terms? So we need to know a lot of those types of things, the dates, and if it's long dates, why. So that can help explain a lot of those types of obstacles. If buyers are providing comparables, like you said, you just write an offer is the best that you think you can, and if you provide those comparables, that helps me as a seller's agent, because now it's not just me saying that, it's hearing it from a separate person, and maybe you're the second or third offer that's come in, and you know, the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese, you know? Yeah. So you never know what, you know, so it can help that way. You know, some sellers are different. Some will just be very hung up on their price and they won't quite listen to it. But others, you know, they may have a sentimental value to the home. They raise their kids, and if you come in with a letter that says, hey, here's a picture of the dog and the kids, and we want to raise our family here, you know, you can twang on the heartstrings and maybe get an offer. Maybe it's a multiple offer situation, and that's going to be a difficult decision for a seller to make when they've got very similar offers otherwise. So, you know, you can get some mileage out of it.
Definitely most agents don't do it. It is extra work, but it is a way to, in a huge way, differentiate yourself and put your best foot forward for your buyer clients. So that's good. Now let's have the reality question or response, and that is, you do all of that, and then the seller, and maybe it's because the property hasn't been on the market a long time, or they're just convinced it's worth more than it's really worth, and so they counter, but it's a minimum amount. So it's almost, we worry sometimes from a buyer's point of view making an offer too low and insulting the seller, but it's almost in reverse. The seller counters, kind of worry a little bit about it, but, you know, insulting the buyer or throwing them off balance. How do you handle that? You get a minimum reduction. How do you prepare your buyer for that?
You know, I think part of the importance of being a realtor and being a good agent for your client is to go ahead and start the discussion with the other agent. Find out what the seller is looking for. We've talked about numbers, but we've also talked about the emotional part. There's many pieces that come into play when you're doing a deal. And it's oftentimes more than just the numbers or more than just who's going to live there. It's finding out do the sellers need to stay in the house for an extra 2 months? Do they need to do a 1031 like you mentioned, or do they need a quick sale? You know, and having that discussion with the other agent is really important to find out the details of this particular transaction and find out what's going to make it successful.
I think Kathy makes a good point as far as communication. You communicate with the other agent, but what I find helpful in these situations is to have that communication with my buyers, with my clients, before the counteroffer is submitted back to us, and let them know that this is a reality. This is one of the possibilities that's going to happen. They might counter back. They might not counter at all, which would be awful, and reject the offer. But if they do counter back, they could counter back at the full asking price. They could counter back with a minimal reduction, like you're saying here. Or they could take a big chunk out of what they're asking and come down to our price quite a bit, which would be great, but that's not always reality. So we need to be ready for all these scenarios. And so it's easier once that does actually happen. Okay, we've discussed this is what's happened. Now how would we like to move forward in our counter, or do we want to continue to move forward? I always think if it doesn't look like it's going to come together, I would never say walk away from the deal unless there's another property. If you like this property, there's no reason to just walk away from it. We could possibly increase it a little bit to match what their decrease was if we feel that the property is worth that value, and submit the offer. And if they don't turn it, then we put our best foot forward. And maybe it's going to take this particular seller some time, if the property hasn't been on the market for a long time, to come around to a reality check again and recognize that the property isn't worth as much as they think it is.
No, it's all very good points. One thing I would add when I'm dealing with a big swing or big gap between a list price and an offer price is I'll tell my clients, all right, we don't need to do the thing where, for $200,000 apart, we cut it in half and that's how we decide where we're going to offer. You want to, in that case, you want to put your best offer forward and offer pretty close to what you're willing to do. And, the seller might cut it in half, but then we say, well, we're not cutting it in half. We're trying to expedite this and get a deal done. So we'll move up a little bit, but we're pretty much at our number. And the reason I think that's better is if you have that initial offer that's a bit closer, then a seller in their mind can say, oh, actually this deal might come. If it's so far away, they might say, and you want to build in a ton of room to negotiate, the seller might say, they're not even real. I'm just going to counter. I'm not going to respond. But if you move up that gap and you maybe have, a couple percent to go, then a seller will look at that and say, oh, maybe we can do something here. I'm going to act serious. I'm going to give them a good counter, and then we tighten up, and then we go to work. So you got to get that first offer out in order to have a seller have a good response to it. Then you can start doing small increases or really start pinning it down.
So what I'm hearing is in today's Park City real estate market, lowballing is not a valid strategy for buyers, at least to come away with in the property.
Well, no. It wouldn't
Spoken like a true buyer's agent.
It wouldn't. Sometimes it's not necessarily a lowball offer. It might be on paper. You look at what they're asking,
So maybe
what they're
legitimate
offering.
and supportable.
But yeah, we work with the reality check situation from buyers' end as well, where no matter what information you're providing to some people, you provide it, and they still want a deal. People instinctually want to get a deal on things, which I want to get a deal on everything as well, so I understand that. So we'll discuss what a reasonable offer price is, and if somebody still wants to go in and put a lower offer, we're going to still put that offer in, and we're going to put our best foot forward to get that offer price. In negotiations, is it likely to happen? No, but now we're into negotiations, and maybe the seller comes back and presents a good point as to why their property is worth this much, and again, that's other information that we've likely discussed with our clients and why this property is worth this much, and if you want this property, you're likely going to end up spending this much money on it. We have the experience in the field. We know what property values are and where they're likely going to sell. Are we exactly right all the time? Most of the time. but maybe not all the time. But yeah, sometimes it takes some time both for the sellers and also it might take some time for buyers. But just because they want a lowball offer, doesn't mean we're not going to do our fiduciary duty and put an offer in. You still got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it definitely is a struggle between finding the balance between what offer for an initial offer a buyer can present that a seller can get excited about, not necessarily accept it, but feel like it's worth negotiating versus too far away and therefore not bothering. And that's one of the hardest things when it comes to a buyer writing, especially their first offer. You go back and forth a little bit, you start dialing it down and you pretty much know what a deal is going to be or not be. So let me go to give you another question. When you're writing an offer, is there anything else, in addition to the story that you might tell in terms of the background on a buyer, anything else that you might include with that offer to strengthen it from a seller's point of view so that they like it?
I always like to ask the listing agent, is there anything besides price that would be favorable to your client? They sometimes say, well, yeah, of course price, but they might say, well, they need another 30 days to move out. They need to close at the end of the year. They need this, they need that. It'd be really great if their family could stay another week. And then I go back to my client, and maybe they're buying it as an investment, or maybe they're buying it and they won't move into it for another month or two. And it's okay, great. That's a very good piece of information besides price. That now we can couple that and say, here's the price, and then we're allowing Aunt Sally June to come stay over Christmas, and you can have your Christmas celebration,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll take it after that, and that's worth a lot of money to people. I think what sometimes buyers, sellers, agents don't understand is it's not always about price. If those terms are right and a seller can stay on the property for a week longer, or they get a couple more days so they can move to their new house, and that is worth thousands and thousands of dollars. And if it doesn't change for the buyer, they don't need to be in that property that time, then the buyer's making out because they're going to save some money on the offer price because the seller's going to factor in these other conditions of the sale.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be a monetary value for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to that point, I had a conversation today with an investor, and their tax accountant advised them that they needed to sell the property after January 1st, 2018. So it's, you know, it's an investment property. It's a completely different game than a real estate property. And it was more than just the price, but rather when the closing date had to be. So, you know, it's important to dig in and get all those pieces of information because it really didn't matter. In this case, well, of course the price is important, but the closing date is paramount.
Yeah, they probably had to pay a lot more taxes.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It was a business decision.
Exactly. So it's worth a lot of money for them.
Yeah, it is.
Well, closing date and price are obviously very important, but ability to purchase the property is very important as well. So if I have a client that's getting financing, from the very beginning, I like to start talking to them about getting pre-approved and getting the financing rolling, because once we do find a property, we're going to want to have a pre-approval letter submitted with our offer so the seller looks at it and knows this is a real buyer. They're qualified to purchase my property. Or if it's a cash offer, some sort of proof of funds, a snapshot of an account or a letter from an accountant where we're going to buy this cash, and now the seller knows that they have a qualified buyer on their hands and going under contract, taking their house off the market for this 30, 45 days, that this is a real person that's going to buy my house in the end.
Yeah, great point. All right, let me wrap up with one last question, and that is, what are your predictions for the future of the Park City real estate market?
Well, one thing is true, is that it comes down to economics and supply and demand. Park City is only so large. And, you know, we're geographically confined by mountains on a couple of sides and the Park City School District. And all of those factors have value for some of our clients, others not so much. We were just talking about with the last statistics that the Jordanelle area, that area has been very robust, and we're now with the recent announcement of the Mayflower area for Deer Valley. That's an area that's going to be changing. So all those things bode very well for the future of Park City real estate.
I agree 100% with that, but then in addition to that, Deer Valley just sold to a major money corporation. What are we calling that?
Newco.
KSL, Newco.
Yeah.
Similar to what happened with Park City when Vail took over. Not this year, but possibly in the future. I personally think likely in the future they're going to have a ski pass that works for all of the resorts. So people come to Deer Valley, they can go to Aspen, they can go to Canada, wherever these different resorts are, and use it. It has brought a lot of skier traffic to Park City. When Park City Canyons combined with Vail, and Vail offers the Epic Pass. Now if they're going to do that with Deer Valley as well, there's no reason not to expect to see that same trend with more skier traffic coming to Deer Valley.
Yeah, the Vail Pass has really stirred up the ski industry. I'm going a little off topic here, but because Vail has offered so many different resorts on one pass, all these other resorts are starting to team up and say, hey, we got this pass. So I'm hoping one day there's going to be like 2 passes and you can see every resort in the whole country, because we're getting close. It's going to happen. But no, it is bringing a lot of people in. Vail has brought a tremendous amount of people into Park City. And Deer Valley, known for their skiing, they kind of did their thing, and they had a very loyal clientele. So it'll be very interesting to see this change of ownership here at Deer Valley, and what kind of extensive marketing package goes in with, you know, a Deer Valley and Aspen, these high-end ski resorts, and who's going to come in to fill that, because we've got some competition. We've got Vail, and now we've got this Deer Valley company they're going to duke it out, I think, and they're going to really push for skier days. So it just equals more people coming to Park City. We have more events, not so much of a seasonal area anymore. Growing up here, it was like big shoulder seasons, and not many people here in the summer. It was all winter, and now it's really all year round for better or for worse. No, but it's great.
So what about prices? Are they stable? They're going to keep going up? They're going to decline? What do you think on that?
I think prices are going to continue to increase. I don't think they're going to continue to increase like they have the last 2-3 years, double-digit appreciation. And frankly, it's a benefit. We don't want this huge appreciation every year because, as history has showed us, it comes crumbling down. So we would just like this steady growth here in Park City and inside the city limits, because there's only a certain number of properties, right. And if no projects come online, then those prices are naturally going to increase. But as we see these different pockets of areas at Mayflower, then we have Main Street, out at Kimball Junction, there's other commercial areas and living situations that people are going to as well.
Yeah. I know when we've talked about this before, when you guys, particularly the buyer specialists here on our team, have said, you know, we want to get our buyer clients the very best deal that they can when they purchase a property, but we don't want them to miss out and not get the property they want in a rising market where they might delay it for whatever reason or just be nervous about proceeding, and somebody else buys properties that they like and now price just went up and made it harder. So it's not easy to walk them through. You guys do a great job. Appreciate it. You do a great job helping the sellers deal with those buyers. And this was fun. This was a great roundtable, our very first. I just want to say to all of you who are watching this video, thank you for joining us. We hope you found it interesting and informative, and we'll do some more of these. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.